The night my grandmother died, my aunt was already in her bedroom emptying the jewelry boxes. I didn't find out until 3 days later. By then, she'd already forged the signature, already moved the money, already convinced my entire family that I, the granddaughter who had spent 4 years sleeping on a cot in that woman's back bedroom to take care of her, had somehow stolen from her first. They called me the thief at Grandma Loretta's own funeral, in front of the pastor. And I stood there in my black dress, holding a funeral program with my grandmother's face on it, so blindsided that I couldn't even form words. My mouth just opened and closed like I'd forgotten how air worked. But here's what they didn't know, what none of them knew. Grandma Loretta had told me something 6 weeks before she passed, something she made me promise to keep quiet until the right moment. And standing in that church, with my Aunt Carol pointing at me in front of God and everybody, I realized the right moment had officially arrived. Before I tell you what Grandma Loretta told me, real quick, where are you watching this from right now? Seriously, drop your city in the comments. I love seeing where my people are tuning in from all over the world. Type it right now because trust me, you are going to want to be sitting down for what comes next. My name is Simone. I'm 26 years old. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of city that moves fast and doesn't look back. And I grew up in a family that, on the surface, looked like the kind of tight-knit black family you see in movies. Sunday dinners, church twice a month, cousins everywhere. But underneath all of that, it was a quiet war, and I didn't even fully understand I was a soldier in it until I was already bleeding out. My grandmother, Loretta Mae Washington, was the anchor of our entire family. A 73-year-old retired schoolteacher who had spent 40 years in the Charlotte public school system, shaping young minds and saving every single dollar she ever made. She owned her home outright, a beautiful craftsman-style house in the historic West End neighborhood. She had a retirement account, a life insurance policy, and a savings account with just over $240,000 sitting in it. $240,000. I know because she showed me the statement herself, sitting at her kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon in October, eating butter pecan ice cream out of the carton with 2 spoons. "Simone baby," she said, "I worked too hard for this money to let these people divide it up like a potluck dish." These people, in Loretta's language, meant her 3 adult children, my mother Denise, my Aunt Carol, and my Uncle Raymond. 3 people who, if I'm being completely real with you, showed up to that house primarily when they needed something from it. My mother Denise was the middle child and the peacekeeper, the one who never made waves, never rocked the boat, and consequently never got anywhere. She worked a decent job as a medical billing specialist, but she was chronically broke because she couldn't say no to anyone who asked her for money, which was everyone, including Carol and Raymond. My Aunt Carol was the oldest, and Carol, Lord have mercy, Carol was something else entirely. Carol had never held a steady job longer than 18 months in her entire adult life. She had a gift for landing in situations that were always, mysteriously, someone else's fault. She'd been married 3 times. She drove a leased Cadillac she couldn't actually afford. She wore designer labels from consignment stores and told people they were new. Carol was what my grandmother used to call all show and no foundation. And Carol had spent the last decade making herself the loudest, most present voice in Grandma Loretta's life, not out of love, but out of strategy. She was positioning herself, and I was too young and too naive to see it clearly. My Uncle Raymond was the youngest and the most absent. He lived in Atlanta, showed up twice a year, and his primary contribution to family life was strong opinions delivered from a distance. He liked to talk about what should happen with the family money without ever actually doing anything to earn a seat at that table. And then there was me. I was the only grandchild who lived in Charlotte, the only one who had watched Grandma Loretta's health begin its slow, quiet decline starting when I was 22. The one who noticed when she started forgetting to turn off the stove, when she started losing her balance getting up from her favorite armchair, when the doctor visits started stacking up and she needed someone to drive her, sit with her, take notes, ask the questions she was too proud to ask herself. My own apartment at that point was a decent 1-bedroom 20 minutes away. But when Loretta had a minor fall in her bathroom in the spring of my 22nd year, I made a decision that I thought was obvious. I moved in. I gave up my lease, packed my things into my Ford Escape, moved my entire life into her spare bedroom, which had an iron twin-bed frame and a window unit AC that sounded like a helicopter taking off. I slept on that cot for 4 years. I drove her to every single doctor's appointment. I managed her medications, 7 different prescriptions organized in one of those weekly pill organizers that I refilled every Sunday night without fail. I cooked for her 5 nights a week. I learned which TV shows she liked and which ones made her anxious. I learned that she needed her bedroom at exactly 68 degrees or she couldn't sleep. I learned every single rhythm of that woman's life because I genuinely, deeply loved her. What did I get for this? From Grandma Loretta, everything. Her stories, her wisdom, her butter pecan ice cream, her unwavering belief that I was going to be somebody. She used to grab my face in both her soft hands and say, "Simone, you are the realest thing in this family. Don't you ever let them dull that." From my Aunt Carol, suspicion, side eyes, comments at Sunday dinners about how I was always there, delivered in a tone that made being present in my grandmother's home feel like a crime. Carol started stopping by more frequently once Loretta's health started visibly declining. She'd show up with takeout containers and her fake warm smile, hug Grandma for 20 minutes, then spend the rest of the visit making little comments. "Simone, you reorganized the kitchen again." "Simone, are you really letting Mama eat that?" "Simone, don't you have your own place you should be getting back to?" She was threatened by my presence, because my presence was a daily, visible reminder that she had chosen not to be there. From my Uncle Raymond, I got exactly nothing except a single text message on my birthday that said, "HBD Lil Cuz," with a balloon emoji. My mother Denise, God love her, she meant well. She'd call Grandma Loretta every few days. She'd visit on weekends when she could manage it. But she was conflict avoidant to her core, and she was terrified of Carol. So when Carol started planting little seeds of doubt, little comments about me having too much access to Grandma's house and Grandma's finances, Denise went quiet instead of defending me. That silence hurt me more than Carol's words ever did. But I kept showing up, every day, because Loretta needed me, and because somewhere deep in my chest, in that soft, stubborn place where your real values live, I believed that doing right by the people you love is its own reward regardless of what anyone else does. I was about to find out just how naive that belief could be. Grandma Loretta passed on a Thursday morning in early March. She passed peacefully in her own bedroom, in her own bed, which is exactly what she had told me she wanted. I was holding her hand. The hospice nurse was there. Outside her window, the dogwood tree in her front yard was just beginning to bloom. I sat with her for a long time after, just being there, just breathing. I made the phone calls myself. I called Denise first, then Carol, then Raymond, then the funeral home. I handled every single piece of it with a steady voice and shaking hands because that is what Loretta would have wanted from me, composure. Grace, no scenes. The scene came later. Carol created it. 2 days after Loretta passed, Carol showed up at the house with a moving truck. I am not exaggerating. A full moving truck. She told me she was securing family heirlooms before they could be, and I want to make sure I get her exact phrasing right here. Mishandled. I blocked the front door with my body. I told her nothing was leaving that house until the estate was properly handled according to Loretta's wishes. Carol looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Baby girl, you were a house guest here. This is family property. Step aside." A house guest. 4 years, 7 prescriptions every Sunday, every doctor's appointment, every 3 a.m. panic when Loretta's blood pressure spiked. A house guest. I kept the door blocked. Carol left, but I saw in her eyes that she wasn't done. The funeral was 3 days later, and that is where Carol made her move. Right there in the reception hall after the service, with the repast food still being laid out on the tables, Carol stood up in front of approximately 40 of our family members and announced, in her loudest, most wounded voice, that she had discovered financial irregularities in Loretta's accounts. That money had been moved. that bills had been paid from Loretta's savings without authorization, that she had spoken to a lawyer who told her these were signs of elder financial abuse. She pointed directly at me. 40 family members turned and looked at me. My mother Denise went completely pale and said absolutely nothing. Uncle Raymond, who had flown in from Atlanta 12 hours earlier and knew nothing about anything, crossed his arms and nodded like he'd suspected this all along. And I stood there in my black dress with my grandmother's funeral program in my hands, listening to my aunt accuse me of stealing from the woman I had given 4 years of my life to protect, and I felt something I cannot fully describe. It wasn't just hurt. It was something colder, cleaner, a kind of crystalline clarity. Because I remembered what Grandma Loretta had told me 6 weeks before she died, sitting at that kitchen table, with the butter pecan ice cream. She hadn't just shown me the bank statement. She had told me what she'd done, what she'd already put in place, what she had quietly, carefully arranged with her attorney of 22 years, a man named Gerald Foster whose office was 6 blocks from her house on Beatty's Ford Road. She'd told me to stay quiet until the right moment. I looked across that reception hall at Carol, with her Cadillac she couldn't afford and her consignment designer bag and her moving truck and her forged intentions. And I thought, baby, the right moment is right now. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I pulled out my cell phone, stepped to the center of that room, and I called Mr. Gerald Foster directly, right there in the reception hall, with 40 family members watching. He answered on the second ring. I put him on speaker. Mr. Foster confirmed what Grandma Loretta had put in place 8 months prior, before any of us had even known her health was declining as rapidly as it was. A legally executed and notarized last will and testament. A durable power of attorney that had been in my name, not Carol's, not Raymond's, not Denise's, mine, for the past 14 months. And a specific clause in the will that addressed exactly this type of situation. A no-contest clause that stated clearly that any beneficiary who legally challenged the will or made accusations of undue influence would be automatically disqualified from receiving anything. Carol's face went through approximately 7 different expressions in about 4 seconds. Mr. Foster also confirmed that every single financial transaction made from Loretta's accounts over the past 14 months had been made by me, legitimately, legally, under the authority of that durable power of attorney, primarily for medical expenses, home maintenance, and Loretta's daily care costs. He had full documentation. He had signed, dated records of every transaction. He had been Loretta's attorney long enough to know her handwriting, her voice, and her intentions intimately. And then Mr. Foster said one more thing. He said that Grandma Loretta had specifically instructed him that if any family member ever accused Simone of wrongdoing regarding her estate, he was to immediately file a formal complaint with the North Carolina State Bar against any attorney those family members had consulted, because Loretta had pre-authorized a defamation claim on my behalf. My grandmother had been protecting me from beyond the grave. She had anticipated every single move Carol was going to make, because she had known Carol her entire life. The reception hall was dead silent. Carol opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Uncle Raymond quietly uncrossed his arms and suddenly became very interested in the paper plate of macaroni and cheese in his hands. My mother Denise started crying, not from grief this time, but from the specific relief of someone who has been holding their breath underwater for too long and finally broke the surface. I thanked Mr. Foster, ended the call, and I looked at my Aunt Carol, really looked at her, and I said, calmly and clearly so every single person in that room could hear me, I think you need to call that lawyer back and let him know the situation has changed. Then I sat down, fixed myself a plate of food, and ate at my grandmother's repast in peace. The weeks that followed were a process. Mr. Foster guided me through the probate. The will was clean, unambiguous, and airtight. Loretta had made sure of that. The estate was structured as follows. The historic West End house, fully paid off and appraised at $380,000, was left to me outright. The $240,000 in savings was divided, $160,000 to me, $40,000 to Denise, and $40,000 split between Carol and Raymond. The life insurance policy, $200,000, named me as primary beneficiary. Carol retained an attorney, a different one from the first, since apparently the first one had, upon reviewing the actual documentation, strongly advised her against pursuing any legal challenge. The second attorney reviewed everything and told her the same thing. The no contest clause was ironclad. If she filed anything, she'd get zero. Not her 40%, not her 40,000. Zero. Carol did not file. What Carol did instead was launch a months-long campaign of phone calls, group text messages, and Facebook posts. Vague, emotional, designed to paint herself as the wronged party without ever saying anything specific enough to be legally actionable. Because Carol was many things, but she wasn't stupid. I hired a social media attorney who sent her one letter. The posts stopped within 48 hours. My Uncle Raymond called me once, about 6 weeks after the funeral. It was the longest real conversation we had ever had. He was quiet, thoughtful. He told me that he owed me an apology for that day at the repast, for crossing his arms and nodding when Carol pointed at me. He said he'd let family pressure make him lazy in his thinking, and that wasn't right. I appreciated that call more than I expected to. Raymond and I aren't close. But we're not enemies either, and I think that's more than either of us had before. My mother Denise and I talk every week now. She finally, for the first time in her adult life, stopped letting Carol run over her. It took watching her daughter get falsely accused in a reception hall for Denise to find her spine. Better late than never. I'll take it. I'm still in Grandma Loretta's house. I repainted the kitchen. I had the hardwood floors refinished. I planted flowers in the front yard right under that dogwood tree that was blooming the morning she passed. I sit on the front porch on Sunday mornings with my coffee, and sometimes I can still feel her out there with me, fussing about whether I watered the hydrangeas enough. I didn't sell the house. A lot of people ask me why. Some people say it's too much house for one 26-year-old woman. They say the market in historic West End is incredible right now, and I could walk away with a serious profit. But here's the thing. This house is not a financial asset to me. This house is proof. Proof that 4 years of showing up mattered. Proof that loving somebody quietly and consistently and without an audience is not the same as being weak or being a pushover or being naive. Proof that my grandmother saw me clearly, saw what I was made of and what I was worth, even when the rest of my family was too caught up in their own smallness to look. Carol and I have not spoken since that day in the reception hall. I don't hate her. Hating someone requires giving them space in your mind that they simply have not earned. What I feel toward Carol is something closer to pity, the kind you feel for someone who spent so much of their life performing love instead of actually practicing it, that they genuinely can't tell the difference anymore. She lost her mother and walked away with $40,000 and a felony-weight lesson about what happens when you underestimate quiet people. I want to ask you something before I go. Do you think I did the right thing? Because I still sit with this sometimes, late at night, with my coffee going cold on the porch railing. My grandmother gave me tools. She gave me legal protection. She gave me a plan. All I had to do was trust it and hold the line. But I'm human, and sometimes I wonder, should I have tried harder to keep the peace? Should I have shared more, even when the will didn't require it? Should I have found some way to make Carol feel less threatened before it ever got to that reception hall? And then I remember her face when she pointed at me, in front of the pastor, at my grandmother's funeral. And I think, no, I don't think I should have done a single thing differently. Blood doesn't make you family. Presence does. Loyalty does. 4 a.m. pill organizers and 68-degree bedrooms and butter pecan ice cream on a Tuesday afternoon. That's what makes you family. I protected my grandmother's legacy. I honored her plan. I held the line. And I would do every single bit of it again. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you've ever been the one who actually showed up and still had to fight for your right to be seen, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Tell me your story. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a new story when it drops. The quiet ones always have the loudest stories. I'll see you next time.